Hello friends, hope all of you are doing well. In today's session, we are going to discuss a very important poem by Edmund Spenser, Prythalamion. Okay, so prior to this, I have covered one more poem of Edmund Spenser, which is very important from your examination perspective, Epithalamion. In case of those viewers who have not watched that video, I kindly request you to go ahead and watch that video because both the poems are fondly related in a particular aspect, which I'll be discussing very shortly. So this is a very important poem, guys, for your examination perspective as well, and those who are preparing for some competitive exams in English. So basically, Prothalmion is a poem of 10 stanzas and 180 lines. So what I've decided is that I'll break down this poem into two videos, 5 stanzas each. So in this session, I'll be discussing only the 5 stanzas, the first 5 stanzas of the poem. And in the upcoming video, which will be coming in the next few days, I'll be discussing the remaining 5 stanzas of the poem Prothalmion by Edmund Spenser. So the major highlights of today's session will be, first of all, we'll be discussing a little bit about the backdrop of the poem Prothalmion. What does the word Prothalmion means and what does the title Prothalmion means basically? And also we'll try to understand that does this word really exist in the English dictionary or it was coined by the author or the poet Edmund Spenser himself. So without wasting any further time, let's move on to the main video. So basically, Prothalmion is a song or a poem celebrating a forthcoming wedding. So in the beginning of today's session, I've already mentioned that Prothalmion is very much connected and fondly connected with Epithalamion, a previous poem by Edmund Spenser. Epithalamion basically was a poem where he celebrated his own marriage with Elizabeth Boyle, and in this marriage also this is a poem celebrating a forthcoming wedding, not of Edmund Spenser but of someone else, which we'll know shortly. So what does the title Prothalmion means? It's a marriage song, of course, the term invented by Edmund Spenser for the title of his poem celebrating the weddings of Catherine and Elizabeth Somerset in 1596. This word is basically derived from epithalamion, literally meaning before the bridal chamber. So that's why I say that this poem is very much connected to epithalamion. If you have understood epithalamion profusely and very nicely, then it will help you to figure out this poem and you can connect it in exams as well, because we see that this title in itself is derived from epithalamion and this word is coined by Edmund Spenser. All right, and epithalamion basically means before the bridal chamber. Prothalmion, the commonly used name of Prothalmion, or a spousal verse in honor of the double marriage of Lady Elizabeth and Lady Catherine Somerset, is a poem by Edmund Spenser, who was born on 1552 and died on 1599. He was one of the important poets of the Tudor period in England. The poem was published in 1596 and it's a nuptial song that he composed that year on the occasion of the twin marriage of the daughters of the Earl of Worcester, Elizabeth Somerset and Catherine Somerset, to Sir Henry Guildford and William Petre. Now these names that I've just said, the daughters of Earl of Worcester, Elizabeth Somerset and Catherine Somerset, are very important from your examination perspective, so you have to definitely remember those. And also the name of the people to whom they got married, those are Sir Henry Guildford and William Petre. Now this poem in itself is quite a important poem, considering the fact that American born British poet T.S. Eliot also quotes a line from this poem Prothalmion. The line says, "Sweet Thames, run softly till I end my song." Now, this line you will find at the end of each stanza of this poem, and T.S. Eliot has quoted this line in his poem The Wasteland in 1922. Alright, so the Wasteland also I have covered in my channel, so if you want to see that explanation of that poem, then you can go ahead and also watch the Wasteland summary and the poem analysis, the link of which is obviously given in the description after watching this video. So after knowing a little bit about the backdrop of the poem Prothalmion by Edmund Spenser, let us now come and discuss and have a line by line analysis of the entire poem. Considering the fact that most of my subscribers and the viewers want the line by line analysis rather than just describing them the summary of the stanzas of the poems, I've decided that I will rather explain the line by line, and after that I'll overall summarize the poem stanza wise. Okay, so for that purpose I have only kept 5 stanzas in this session and the remaining 5 stanzas I'll discuss in the upcoming video. So the poem starts with the lines, calm was the day, and through the trembling air, sweet breathing Zephyrus did softly play. Now, here the poet is setting the tone of the poem, the total ambience and the environment in which he is expressed with the help of the first two lines. Alright, here the word Zephyrus is very important because Zephyrus, sometimes shortened in English to Zephyr, is the Greek god of the west wind. Alright, the gentlest of the winds, Zephyrus is known as the what? Fruitifying wind, the messenger of spring. So you can understand that what season is going on and what is the backdrop of this poem when the poet is actually describing the environment around him. It's like the onset of the spring. All right, so you don't need to remember the entire thing, just you remember that Zephyrus is basically the Greek god of west wind. All right, a gentle spirit that lightly did delay hot Titan's beam. Now hot Titan here obviously means the sun, alright, which then did glister fair. So it was a very bright day. We can see the beautiful environment that the poet is trying to depict with his eyes. When I whose sullen care. Now here there is a drastic change between the environment that he is in and the the mental mindset that he is having, because sullen care means he is having a sulky day or he is in a bad temper. So basically in his personal context he is not having a good day. Now let's see that why he is not having a good day. Through discontent of my long fruitless stay in Prince Court, an expectation vain of idle hopes which still do fly away like empty shadows did afflict my brain. Now we get to know that even in the presence of such a beautiful day, the onset of spring, why the poet is having a bad day, because he believes that he has had a long fruitless stay in the Prince Court. We know now that the poet walks in the Prince Court, and whatever expectations he had, it went on vain, and there were idle hopes which are lying just, and he was not feeling worthy. All right, he was not feeling worthy in the Prince Court, as he has compared it like empty shadows, fine, which was afflicting his brain. Now let's move on. Walked forth to ease my pain. Now he is moving out of that agony that he was suffering in the court in order to ease his pain along the shore of silver streaming Thames. Now this is a very important line. Why? Because here the mention of the famous river, the longest river in England is actually given. Thames is basically the longest river in England, which is also known alternately in parts as the river Isis. So you have to remember that Thames river of England is also known as Isis river. Okay, whose rutty bank the which his river Hams. So river Hams is also a river in like England. Both the rivers Thames and Hams are in England, and primarily if you see that both of them have a distance of around 3.5 hours, so quite far away from each other. But here the poet has mentioned both the rivers. Alright, but the primary focus is on the Thames river, which is the longest river in England. Was painted all with variable flowers, and all the meads adorned with dainty gems. Now meads here means meadow of course, and here dainty means delicately small and pretty. So he is trying to describe the environment again after expressing the audience about his mental agony that was going through. He is trying to explain that how the surroundings of river Thames is very beautiful. The meadows, that means the greenery around it, is like it's like a dainty gems. Okay, it's like adorned with dainty gems, that means very beautiful gems. Okay, so actually theoretically there are no gems present here, but he's just trying to compare the glitters of the greenery with dainty gems fit to deck maiden's bowers. Now bowers means a pleasant shady place under trees or climbing plants in a garden or wood. So all these lines we can figure out that it's a very greenery environment. All right, and crowned their paramours against the bridal day which is not long. So here the poet is giving a hint about the marriage. All right, so he is giving a hint about the marriage. So very important line again. He is trying to say that the bridal day is very soon and it is not long that the marriage will take place. And the end of the first stanza, you will see that he is saying the same line which I have described in the beginning, from which T.S. Eliot has also quoted the same line in his poem The Wasteland. Sweet Thames, run softly till I end my song. So he is urging the river, in England, that is the longest river, Thames, to run softly till he ends his song. Because we have discussed about the backdrop, when we're discussing about the backdrop of the poem, we've discussed that Prothalmion is basically a song or a poem to describe, to celebrate marriages. So he is actually, with the help of this poem, he's trying to sing in the honor of the marriage of the twin daughters. All right. So that is how he ends all his stanzas. Sweet Thames, run softly till I end my song. So moving on to the second stanza starts with the lines, there in a meadow by the riverside, a flock of nymphs I chanced to espy. Now nymphs, again, I have described this word in the previous poem Epithalamion. Basically nymphs means a mythological spirit of nature imagined as a beautiful maiden inhabiting rivers, woods or other location, and espy means catch sight of. So here the poet Edmund Spenser got the opportunity and got the chance to see a flock of nymphs. So there were many nymphs. Okay, nymphs are considered to be a very beautiful creature portrayed as a beautiful girl, and they are usually seen inhabiting rivers, woods or other locations. Again, you have to understand that it's a hypothetical assumption, and a hypothetical portrayal of nymphs in this poem actually describes the beauty of the meadows and the surroundings of the river Thames. They are not actually present. Okay, all lovely daughters of the flood thereby. So nymphs are basically considered to be the daughters of the river, with goodly greenish locks, all loose, united as each had been a bride. Now here he is trying to describe the nymphs. So basically the nymphs have green hairs. Okay, so greenish locks means green hairs, all loose united as each had been a bride. So the nymphs are so beautiful mystical creatures and mythological figures that each one of them look like a bride. We know that a girl looks most beautiful on his wedding day, and on that day they are called as brides. So nymphs are actually looking so beautiful. Actually they look beautiful all the time. If you are very much interested in Greek mythology, you will see that the portrayals of nymphs are given in a very beautiful fashion. All right, and each one had a little wicker basket made of fine twigs entrailed curiously, in which they gathered flowers to fill their flasket. Now all the nymphs, there are more than one nymphs, because the poet has already mentioned a flock of nymphs. All right, now all of them were carrying a basket with them, and that basket is made out of fine twigs. That means the small branches of the trees, a very beautiful one. So here let's find out that why they are carrying the basket. And with fine fingers cropped full featurously the tender stalks on high of every sort which in that meadow grew. So basically the nymphs here are to collect something with the help of their baskets. So they gathered some, the violet pallid blue. So the violets, they are collecting the violets, the little daisy that at evening closes. So they are also collecting the daisy plants, the daisy flowers, which closes at evening. All right, the virgin lily and the primrose true. So also the lilies, they are collecting the lilies, the primrose, with store of vermeil roses. So obviously roses are there, because we know that roses are considered to be a very important element of romanticism, to deck their bridegroom's poises. So all these flowers are being collected by the nymphs to, you know, to decorate the bridegroom's poises against the bridal day, which was not long. Again here the poet is giving about the hint of the upcoming marriage of the twin daughters. Fine. So here he is trying to say that the nymphs are collecting such beautiful flowers like the violet pallid blue, the little daisy, the virgin lily, the primrose, the roses, primarily in order to, celebrate the upcoming marriage of the twin daughters. All right, the twin marriage, actually not the twin daughters, the twin marriage of the two girls, Catherine and Elizabeth. And finally again the second stanza ends with the same line, sweet things run softly till I end my song. So you will find this line in at the end of every stanza, and this is actually a hint for you to remember this poem in a very explicit manner, because obviously you cannot memorize all the lines of the poem, and it is not expected out of you. All you need to do is remember a particular segment which connects you to a particular poem, because there are so many in your MEG one syllabus British poetry. So coming to the third stanza, it starts with lines like, "With that I saw two swans of goodly hue." Now, goodly means considerable in size or quantity, and hue means a color or shade. "Come softly swimming down along the lee." Now, the lee word means the sheltered side of something, the side away from wind. All right. "Two fairer birds I yet did never see." Now, the two swans, you will see that the upcoming two stanzas, he is trying to explain the beauty of these two swans. Okay, so very important, again, a very important turn after encountering the nymphs. The poet now is like has changed his vision to the swans. Okay, the swans are so beautiful and fascinating. In real life also we have seen that swans are actually very beautiful, and they are such beautiful creatures. All right. "Two fairer birds I yet did never see, the snow which doth the top of Pindus strew." All right, so this again two important words. I like to explain it to you. Pindus, the word Pindus, it is actually a mountainous range, okay, located in northern Greece and southern Albania. It's also known as the spine of Greece. So all you need to remember here, that here the poet is trying to compare the swans with Pindus. All right, Pindus is nothing but a mountainous range. You can just remember that it's a mountainous range located in northern Greece. If you want to move it further, you can also remember that it's also present in the southern Albania. And it's known as the spine of Greece. And dot means obviously it's a form of do. All right, which you all know. "Did never Witter's shoe." Okay, shoe is again the old-fashioned spelling of show. So here the poet is trying to say that he has never seen such beautiful swans in his entire life, nor Jove himself, when he a swan would be, for love of Leda, whiter did appear, yet Leda was, they say, as white as he, yet not so white as this, nor nothing near, so purely white they were. So in these 4 5 lines, the poet Edmund Spenser is trying to depict and explain Greek mythology in a very beautiful fashion. So here the two words that is actually worth noticing is Jove and Leda. So both of them were in love, and basically Jove, in order to express his love and in order to court Leda, he turned himself into a swan. Okay. So basically in some interpretation you will also see that Jove was none other than Zeus. We know that Zeus is a god of thunder, is actually the god of all gods. All right. So many other interpretations are there. You can just remember Jove and Leda, that what Jove did in for this love of Leda is that he converted himself to swan in order to court Leda. So here the poet is trying to say that even the whiteness of that swan is nothing in compared to what the beauty he's encountering as for now. All right, the two swans that he is seeing as for now is far more superior than the whiteness or the elegance of Jove in itself when he converted himself to swan in order to court Leda. Also, it is compared to Leda as well, because Leda in itself was white, very much white, as like Jove. So basically you have to understand here is that the poet is comparing the two swans with the Greek mythology of Jove and Leda, where Jove basically converted himself into a swan in order to court Leda. "That even the gentle stream the which them bare seemed foul to them, and bade his billows spare to wet their silken feathers, lest they might soil their fair plumes with verdure not so fair." So here the word billows means waves specially. Okay, the waves of the river or a sea, basically a great wave or surge of water. So in these 4 lines, what the poet is trying to say, that the swans were so beautiful and so elegant and so much out of the world, that it seems like when they're moving in water, even the water is like, can has a possibility there is a possibility that even the water can spoil the beauty of the swan. So that is what being said. You see that here the line, that to wet their silken feathers least they might. So the what obviously they are moving in the water, so obviously the feathers will get wet, and the poet is having a concern regarding that even the water has a slightest possibility of ruining the beauty of the beautiful swans here. All right. So let's move on. And mar their beauty's bright. Mar means what? Impair the quality or appearance of, or spoil. So that's what I said in the last four lines, that there is a slightest possibility that the river water can spoil the beauties of the beautiful swan that's shown as heaven's light. So here the beauty of the swan is compared with the heaven's light. So you can understand how much the poet is fascinated by looking at the two swans. All right, so he is comparing the beauty and the brightness of the two swans with the heaven's light against their bridal day, which was not long. Again, the last two lines you will see there is a repetition in all the stanzas. Here again the poet is giving the hint of the important marriage day which is upcoming, and ending the stanza with the same line, sweet themes run softly till I end my song. So he is still singing in the celebration of the upcoming marriage, the twin marriage, and he is requesting the Thames River, which is also happens to be the longest river of England, to run very softly so that the sound doesn't disturbs him in the, in the celebrating song, till he ends his song. All right. So the fourth stanza starts with the lines, "Eftsoon the nymphs, which now had flowers their fill, ran all in haste to see that silver brood." Now, eftsoon is a word which means soon after or once again. Now, here, after the third stanza, where the poet was fascinated by the beauty of the swan, the vision is slightly shifted from the poet to the nymphs. All right, the nymphs were busy collecting flowers for the bridal day, of course. Now, all of them got aware about the two swans, and what all they did, they have already done collecting all the flowers, and they all ran in haste in order to catch a glimpse of the silver brood. Now, brood means a family of birds. Here we can see that only two swans are there, as they come floating on a crystal flood, whom when they saw, they stood amazed still. Now we can see that the water of the river is considered as crystal flood. So the swans are coming in the river, alongside the river, swimming the river in a very still fashion, and when the nymphs saw the swan, they were totally fascinated and amazed, okay, by looking at the swans. Their wondering eyes to fill, them seemed they never saw a sight so fair. So we already know that the nymphs are mystical creatures and they're aware of all the beautiful elements of the nature. But when they saw the swans, they have never seen a sight so fair. They have never seen such a beautiful thing before. Of fowl so lovely that they sure did deem them heavenly born, or to be that of same pair. So what the nymphs were thinking is that these two swans are of heavenly born. Heaven has given birth to these two swans who were swimming along the crystal flood. All right, which through the sky drove Venus' silver team. Now we know that again there is element of mythology here. In Greek mythology, we know that this one Greek god Venus has been driven by a chariot of swans. Okay, so the nymphs are comparing these two swans with the swans who drives the chariot of the Venus. Alright, for sure they did not seem to be bigot of any earthly seed. Now, in any ways, the nymphs were, unable to convince themselves that these are of earthly. Okay, they are thinking that these are heavenly. All right, the two swans which are moving along the river are heavenly born, but rather angels are of angels breed. Now the second comparison that the nymphs are doing of the swans is that they are comparing the swans with angels, or if not angels, they are of angels breed. That means the offsprings of the angels. Yet were they bred of summer's heat, they say, in sweetest season, when each flower and weed the earth did fresh array, so fresh they seemed as day. Now, in this final few lines, we'll see that actually the poet is again trying to convince the audience that no, they are not heavenly born, nor they are angels or angel spirit, rather they are creatures of earth. All right, and they reflect the freshness of the earth, and they were like shining and very beautiful. And because why that is happening, that is again in the final two lines, it's giving the hint of the upcoming marriage, even as their bridal day, which was not long. Now here there is a change. All right, the second last line of this stanza is giving the hint of the marriage of the swans, even as their bridal day, which was not long. So that's why this pair is moving along, and they were looking so beautiful, because the poet is trying to say the audience that they have also their bridal day upcoming, which was not long. And finally ending the stanza with the same line, sweet themes run softly till I end my song. So coming to the fifth stanza, which also happens to be the final stanza of today's session, the remaining five stanzas I'll be discussing in the upcoming session. Then forth they all out of their baskets drew great store of flowers, the honor of the field, that to sense did fragrant odors yield, all which upon these goodly birds they threw. Now the nymphs were totally fascinated at the, you know, at the sight of the swans. Two swans were so much excited that whatever flowers they have collected in their baskets for the wedding day, in order to decorate the, entire marriage, they were throwing on the swans. And because in order to decorate the river, all right, because we have also seen in the previous stanza that the swans also have their bridal day upcoming. So the nymphs were so much fascinated by the beauty of the swans that they started throwing flowers at them, all right. And all the waves did strew, that like old Peneus water they did seem. Now Peneus again is very very important word. Basically Peneus was a Thessalian river god, again a mystical and mythological figure from Greek mythology. So Peneus was a Thessalian river god, one of the 3000 rivers, all right. Basically Peneus was a child of Oceanus and Tethys. So you don't need to remember all such technicalities, but just remember that Peneus was a Thessalian river god. All right, and basically Oceanus, he was a offspring of a child of Oceanus and Tethys. And so that they, like old Peneus waters, they did same when down along by peasant Tempest shore. So Tempest again a very important word. So here Tempest basically actually is a valley which is about 5 miles long between Mount Olympus and Mount Ossa in Thessaly, famous for its beauty. Okay, Thessaly, Greece. So it's very famous for its beauty, and in ancient times it is regarded as sacred to Apollo. So Apollo is again a very Greek god. I think I've already told you in my previous videos about Apollo. So here the poet is again trying to depict two more very important mythological elements. So first is Peneus was a Thessalian river god, and second is the Tempest, which is a valley, and it's actually a valley between the Mount Olympus and the Mount Ossa in Thessaly, Greece. So you can see the next line, the mention of Thessaly is there. Scattered with flowers through Thessaly they stream. Okay, so this again is giving a very different idea from the concept that the poet is trying to depict by urging the river Thames to run softly, because here we can see that the swans are actually going through the Thessaly, all right. So that they appear through Lily's planter store like a bride's chamber flow. Two of those nymphs, meanwhile, two garland bound. Now, what is happening here is after throwing the flowers that they have collected for the marriage to the swans and decorating the river in order to honor the two beautiful swans, what the nymphs are doing next is that two of them are like now busy making garlands, okay, of freshest flowers. So the freshest flowers they have collected, they are making the garlands, which in that mead they found in the meadows. So in the meadows they have collected the flowers. So mead is actually a word for meadows, the which presenting all in trim array their snowy foreheads there withal they crown. So they made two crowns for the swans and decorated and honored the swans with the two crowns. So as you can see in a lot of Western marriages, you can see the girl wearing a crown of flowers. So here it's actually an old tradition of England, where you'll see in Western cultures they do it in Christian marriages, of course. So here the nymphs are doing that honor to the swans by making the garlands and the crowns with the freshest flowers and honoring them by crowning them with the flowers, this one crown. Okay, whilst Wang did sing this lay, prepared against that day. So the nymphs were also started singing, and one of them were singing actually against their bridal day, which was not long. Sweet Thames, run softly till I end my song. So here the hint of upcoming marriage is again given by the poet, and ending the stanza with the same line, Sweet Thames, run softly till I end my song. So this is the video, guys. In this session I have actually discussed about the backdrop of the poem Prothalmion by Edmund Spenser, how it is very much connected with the previous poem of Edmund Spenser, Epithalamion, and what is the source of inspiration of this poem, what are the two characters, the twin marriages of Elizabeth and Catherine, that is going to take place shortly. And in order to honor this marriage, actually Edmund Spenser wrote this poem. So I have tried my best to do the line by line analysis of the first five stanzas. The next five stanzas discussion will be coming very shortly in our channel. In case if you have any other doubts regarding the first five stanzas, which I don't think you should have, because I have tried to be as precise as I can, but in case if you do have, do let us know in the comment section. And in case if you have any other queries, or you do want me to cover any other literary work of any eminent author or poet, please let me know in the comment section. Your comments means a lot to me, and it actually inspires me to go ahead and create such videos for you people. So till then, stay at home, stay safe, God bless you, and thank you all.